Hey everybody, it's Allison, and today we're going to be talking about the Battle of San Jacinto. Now, I've been really struggling with this video because I'm a super visual learner, and if there's one thing I knew I couldn't actually produce for you, it's a full-on battle reenactment. So I've been trying to figure out how to reenact the battle in a small-scale way that would make a lot of sense and be visually appealing. And if you have ever met me or ever been in my office, you know that I am just a little bit of a hoarder. So this morning I rooted through my office, found all my supplies, and I think we are ready to go.
Before we can talk about the Battle of San Jacinto, we need to move all of our players along to get them to San Jacinto itself. So the first thing we need to do is do a little bit of a timeline, just so you know who is where and when. So this is our map of the coast of Texas. This is San Antonio, where the Alamo is. This is Washington on the Brazos, where the convention's being held that declares Texas independent on March 2nd. This is San Felipe de Austin, the capital that Austin had set up in his colony. This is Harrisburg, a town that is completely enveloped by modern-day Houston. And this is the town of Nacogdoches. So this is the way to Louisiana. This is the way to Mexico. Okay, now that we know our landscape, let's meet our players. First up, we have Santa Anna. He will be played by this little dude. He is in San Antonio because he was there for the fall of the Alamo on March 6th. Now on that same day, March 6th, Sam Houston, who is played by this little bunny, was at Washington on the Brazos at the convention that declares Texas free. So we need to move our timeline from March 6th to April 21st, and that is 46 days, and frankly, not a ton happens in that time, so we're going to do this quickly. On March 13th, Sam Houston starts his army retreating eastward. He doesn't want to directly attack Santa Anna, and he ends up taking his army to Gross's plantation, where he trains them for a fortnight. Now, April 11th is a very special day, because on that day, Santa Anna crosses the Brazos River. So he has crossed the river, and on that same day, Sam Houston receives the twin sisters. Now today we are using duck cars. They are ducks. So these cars and their exhaust pipes make them look like artillery, which is what they represent. The twin sisters are a set of matched cannons that Sam Houston receives on April 11th. Now on April 15th, Santa Anna gets to Harrisburg and he burns the town. So we're actually going to use a red tile to show that he burned the town down. And he kind of keeps going a little bit. 2 days later, Sam Houston arrives at Harrisburg. And it's at this time, we're going to move these off to the side for now. It's at this time on April 17th that Sam Houston learns something. He learns that Santa Anna has crossed the bayou, but he has crossed it at Vince's Bridge. The geographical area was riddled with bayous and with rivers, and so what Santa Anna had unwittingly done was cross into a dead-end zone. So he crossed on a bridge, and the only way he could get back from that was to cross on the same bridge. So Sam Houston knows that this is his time, because Santa Anna is trapped. So on April 19th, Sam Houston ends up leaving all of his sick or injured men behind, and I'm going to put 2 counting bears. So there are a little over 200 of them. He leaves them behind with extra supplies at a camp, and then he crosses the bayou. Now this is the same bayou that Santa Anna has just crossed on the bridge, but Sam Houston actually finds a way to cross it farther down. There are ways across it, but the easiest way is the bridge that he has already passed. Now on April 20th, Sidney Sherman ends up getting into a skirmish with the Mexican cavalry, and Sidney Sherman was the American cavalry leader. So we're gonna put that skirmish right here in the Gulf of Mexico, mostly because that's where we have space for it. So the two armies are aware of each other, and so the small cavalry skirmish that occurs, only one person is killed, a few horses are injured, and we're gonna do it like that. One person is killed, I think a few horses were injured, not too much of a pivotal moment for the armies per se, but it's in this small skirmish on April 20th that Maribel B. Lamar, a young cavalry officer, really distinguishes himself in the battle and ends up getting a promotion and ends up helping his political career in the future. So this brings us to April 21st, which is the date that we need to talk about. So let's redo the map. So now we have our map. We need to introduce our characters and set the stage. So we already know this is Santa Anna. His camp was about right here. This is Sam Houston. His camp was way back here. Now, we've already talked about the cavalry. We're going to be using these cars for the Texas cavalry, and they're going to go right here. We have talked a little bit about the Mexican cavalry. They're going to be the orange cars. They're going to be right here. We have the twin sisters cannons. They will be right here. The Mexicans had artillery. We're just going to assign them 2 ducks as well. And then we have the armies. So before we put them on the battlefield, let's talk about numbers and locations. So we're going to be using these guys to symbolize the Texas Army. Green and blue, Texas. And each of these counting bears represents 100 people. And actually, our number is off. So we remember how we said that Sam Houston left 200 of his army, a little over 200 people, at a camp before he crossed over to the San Jacinto Prairie. He actually lost 100 additional people during that journey to San Jacinto because they went home to help their families with the runaway scrape. So when we start the Battle of San Jacinto, we have Sam Houston's army has about 900 people. So now we need to talk about Santa Anna's army. Santa Anna's army will be represented by the red counting bears. And he had about 700 men in his unit. And then on the morning of the 21st, an additional unit arrived. That was General Koss's army. And General Koss brought his troops across Vince's Bridge, and they end up meeting up with the Mexican army, and they take the far position, way over here. So if you're wondering about the terrain, the teal Play-Doh, this is marshland. So this is not easy territory to cross. It's really not something that you want to go into. The green is a natural ridge. So there was a ridge down the middle, and then there's also a natural sort of raised portion on the other side of the ridge, which is where Sam Houston camped his army. So he hid his army in the trees over here. So they are out of sight. Right there we have a river, and right here we have the San Jacinto River, and this little cute blue spot is Peggy's Lake. Where these armies have met is sort of a naturally fortified position. So Santa Anna has really grouped his army into a corner. They can't go back, they can't go to this side, they could go that way, and that's the direction of Vince's Bridge, that way. So Sam Houston, on the other hand, is sort of in a better spot. He has the high ground, his men are surrounded by trees, so they are not visible, and also he's heading towards Santa Anna. Now, since General Koss's army arrived the morning of the 21st, Sam Houston held a war council with his people that day. And everyone in the council agreed we need to attack the Mexican army. But they didn't really agree on the time. Sam Houston didn't want to attack first thing in the morning, and they sort of didn't know the exact plan. So they end up disbanding the council, but knowing they are going to attack. So what Sam Houston does is he sends some of his people, I'm going to send this green bear, he sends them over with Deaf Smith to destroy Vince's Bridge. So they leave the battlefield and destroy Vince's Bridge because that is the easiest access point to this area. And by destroying the bridge, they are cutting off any additional reinforcements so that no more armies like General Koss's can arrive and back up Santa Anna. Now, the other thing Sam Houston does is he waits. Santa Anna's army is exhausted. They have been marching for days in unfamiliar terrain. It's an unusually wet season, so they're just soaking wet. They're in unfamiliar territory. They're tired, they're hungry, they're just exhausted. So when they don't immediately get attacked on the morning of the 21st, they decide to take a siesta. I'm forgetting the embattlements. So Santa Anna did set up, let's do little stacks, did set up little embattlements in front of his camp to sort of protect the camp. Yeah, do it like that. But around 3 o'clock, his army took a siesta. So we're gonna lie a lot of the bears down and turn them around. Maybe they're playing cards. They're just kind of taking a break. They've had a long, hard couple of weeks, and they're exhausted. And this really played into Sam Houston's favor. So Sam Houston decides at 3 o'clock, that's when they're going to attack. And because of this natural ridge, and because there were no sentries posted from the Mexican army, the Texan army got really close. So the cavalry is off screen, but they are looping around. They're going around this natural ridge. Sam Houston has given his army a pep talk. And the pep talk involves remembering the Alamo and remembering Goliad and remembering all the battles and all the fear and all the frustration that they have suffered through, and that this is the time, this is the battle. So his army manages to sneak up within 200 yards of the Mexican encampment before anyone in the Mexican encampment notices. And so they just plow right in. Take out some of these guys, take out those guys, take these, fires down the middle. Okay, so everything is kind of a mess. Also, it's appropriate that Sam Houston fell over. The Battle of San Jacinto only lasts for 18 minutes, and those 18 minutes are very decisive. In those 18 minutes, 630 of Santa Anna's army are killed. We're going to turn these little bears face down. Now, if you noticed and did all the counting, you'll see that I had 12 bears on the table for Santa Anna, which is a little bit of a rough estimate because we have 630 that were killed and then we have 730 that are taken prisoner. So we're going to set those guys right over here. We'll give them someone to guard them. So that is 6. So you notice that I'm missing a bear. It's because the numbers, though they are 1,200, or the biggest numbers, there are some additional. So we have 700 are captured. But during the ensuing 18 minutes, Santa Anna takes off his uniform and makes a break for it. So a number of soldiers were actually trying to escape, and they got pretty far before they were captured. So, these bears captured them and then brought them back to camp. So Sam Houston's army didn't know what Santa Anna looked like. And without him wearing his uniform, it was pretty impossible for them to tell. I'm going to put Sam Houston right here. So as they bring this unknown man, who is clearly a Mexican soldier, into the camp, all the rest of the prisoners start shouting, "El Presidente, El Presidente." And that's when Sam Houston knew that they had captured Santa Anna. Now, we've put Sam Houston lying on his back because during the battle, he had 2 horses shot out from underneath him, and his ankle was shattered. So he was pretty injured. He did recover from his injuries, but that was definitely threw him for a loop. And so that meant that during the aftermath of the battle, he was a little bit immobile just because his ankle was broken. Okay, so there we have it, the Battle of San Jacinto. In one decisive move, the Mexican army is routed, the Mexican leader is captured, and the Texans have won, which means that they then demand that Santa Anna surrender, and he declares defeat, and he ends up taking all the rest of the Mexican army out of Texas. So 18 minutes, finished off the revolution.